Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Drooks Milan Unboxing. Since we've got all the fights cancelled, we're going into the past of this illustrious sport of ours. And this is part 2 of sharing some books that I have in my collection and that I have read that I thought was quite a good read, and maybe something you can try order from Amazon or just go to your library, depending what the coronavirus restrictions are that you've got in your country. Going on, here's another book, also by a South African author. It's based in the UK now, Gavin Evans, same author of Dancing Shoes is Dead. And this was a gift that friends brought to me, you know, and luckily my friends obviously knows I'm a boxing guy. The pictures are everywhere in the wall, and they bring me boxing books. And this was just was just bought from a thrift store, you know, one of those things where they have all these books that you can buy in bulk, and they bought books and this popped out. And it's also by Gavin Evans, as I've said, Kings of the Ring, the history of heavyweight boxing. Kings of the Ring, history of heavyweight boxing. Now what's nice is it's got a nice picture format. It takes you through guys. Here we have Tommy Burns, the shortest guy to hold the heavyweight title. So it takes you from the very early days, from John L. Sullivan all the way through to the days of Vitaly Klitschko. Now what he took here, he took the undisputed heavyweight champions or the lineal heavyweight champions, the guys that were clearly recognized as a top guy in their weight divisions. So it's from John L. Sullivan through to Joe Louis, Muhammad Ali, and then other guys like Larry Holmes was recognized by Ring as the heavyweight champion. He had the WBC belt and then later the IBF, but he clearly established himself as a #1 guy. So Larry Holmes is there, Lennox Lewis is there, Vander Holyfield, Riddick Bowe, and it ends with Vitaly Klitschko. Because Klitschko, you will remember, he was WBO champion, lost that, eventually got established himself as the #2 guy, after he gave Lennox Lewis so much hell, and Vladimir got knocked out by an own Corey Sanders. And when Lennox retired, everybody sort of agreed the winner between Vitaly Klitschko and Corey Sanders would be the heavyweight champion, and so Vitaly is in here as well. But you're not going to find the guys like, for example, in the Holmes days, the days of Larry Holmes, you had all these slew of WBA champions. So unfortunately for us, Gary Coetzee is not in there, and Corey, who held the WBO belt, is not in there. But all these heavyweight champions that were either undisputed or recognized as the #1 guy, they the guy who beat the guy, are in here. And it's also, what is also nice about this book, is included those black fighters in the very early years who were barred sort of, or avoided, didn't get their shot at the heavyweight title. People like Sam Langford and Harry Walls. These guys are also get their space in the book, and there are also little profiles about them as well. So Kings of the Ring, the history of heavyweight boxing by Gavin Evans, a very good book with some really good pictures in it. Going back to an author that I did in the previous segment, A Fighter's Mind, Inside the Mental Game by Sam Sheridan. Now Sam Sheridan did the first book, A Fighter's Heart, which is more about his own journey, and then he followed it a couple of years on with The Fighter's Mind. And once again, it's a book about combat sports, not necessarily exclusively boxing. So there's guys from the world of mixed martial arts. There are guys like Olympic wrestler Dan Gable in there, and it's a very interesting insight into not only their work ethic, but their absolute perfectionism. A guy like Gable who loses like 1 point in a wrestling match in the Olympic level, and that bothers him. Never mind the fact that he beat everybody. So you get that insight into their mind, and also a bit he goes into Randy Couture and mixed martial arts, how he handles his nerves beforehand and all that. And it's information that I could apply to my life in general and non-boxing related stuff. So if you're interested about the psychological, the mental aspect of fighting, good book this, The Fighter's Mind by Sam Sheridan. Now back to the more modern era. We all know this guy. There's a lot of autobiographies, and quite a few that I've read, you know, but I thought that this one to me was the most compelling. It's also a long, heavy read, but it felt quick because it's very compelling. Mike Tyson, Undisputed Truth, takes him from his childhood days through boxing, through his incarceration, and winning the title, the defeats, all the things that he struggled with outside the ring, you know, and you get the feeling, the personality almost bounces out of the pages and grabs you. You get a feeling of Mike Tyson as the feeling I get from a book is an extremely intense individual, extremely intelligent individual, and thoughtful individual, and somebody's also a little bit crazy, you know, you get that. So he's very compelling, sometimes almost fear-provoking, and there's also many funny parts in this book, if you can think about it. Mike Tyson actually has his comedic talents. If anybody ever saw his one-man show, I think it's also called Undisputed Truth, that Spike Lee directed, there's some very, very funny moments in it as well. So Mike Tyson, Undisputed Truth, I think a very good sports autobiography. I prefer biographies, but this one is really, really good. You get a good feel of a man. Another one, it's also a South African. We have two Hall of Famers. We have Brian Mitchell, and we also have referee and judge Stan Christodoulou. Now that's actually a piece of South African boxing history, but also internationally. You know, he starts his first world title assignment with an epic Charlie Weir against Romeo Anaya bantamweight title fight. It goes through the history of South Africa, with boxing taking the lead to end sport segregation. Long before apartheid was even ended, boxing was the first one to end that racial discrimination. As strange as it sounds in today's days, there were actually a black champion and a white champion each weight, and they abandoned that eventually. Luckily, that it sounds totally crazy today how sick the system was, and they made one champion. And that is how boxing sort of started breaking down these racial barriers in South Africa. So you get a lot of that, and also just a very nice rollicking road trip of Stan, how he goes all over the world and referees these fights in far-flung places like Japan and Korea, sometimes having to run away in the middle of the night when the fight doesn't go on and the promoter hasn't paid and the crowd's rioting, getting dropped off somewhere in the middle of nowhere, on the edge of a jungle, and have to fend for yourself. Also the corruption of boxing, people trying to bribe you, and also the pressures of judging and the pressures of refereeing, touches on the subject of ring deaths, and also some amusing anecdotes. There's also humor in such a brutal sport as boxing. So it's a really good bird's eye view through boxing history, South African boxing history, as well as international boxing history. Remember, he also refereed Marvin Hagler against Roberto Duran, Alexis Arguello against Aaron Pryor, and he was also a judge again in the first Evander Holyfield-Lennox Lewis fight, which ended into that very controversial draw. And he was the one that actually got it right and scored the fight for Lewis in that draw. And you also get his take on that fight. So a very interesting book as well, The Life and Times of Stanley Christodoulou, by Stan Christodoulou's autobiography. And one I'll end with, now this is a book called The Fighters by Chris Gravenstein. It's a very old book. It's out of print, so if you in South Africa, you're going to have to look in your libraries. Many libraries would still have one. I was very lucky to get this from a second-hand bookstore. It was actually a present from one of my friends that gave it to me for my 40th birthday. Thank you, Ilse. Probably one of the best gifts I ever gotten. And it's a history by newspaperman Chris Gravenstein of South African boxing, going right back to the beginning, at the turn of a previous century, to the James R. Cooper, South Africa's first heavyweight boxing champion. And then it ends there in the very early 80s with Gary Coetzee's unsuccessful second challenge for WBA heavyweight title against Michael Dokes. And also guys like Nkosana Happy Boy and Gazi coming into it, challenging Sam Serrano for the title. Peter Matabula, who became our third world champion. all those guys are in there, but also the early days people like heavyweights Ben Ford, Don McCorkindale, Johnny Rolfe that my grandpa used to talk about. If you want to know something about South African boxing history until about 1980, there's a whole new chapter after that needs to be done. Ron Jackson has done it in a different format book. The Fighters by Chris Gravenstein. See if you can get a copy on eBay or secondhand somewhere or at your local library if you want to know the history of South African boxing till about just about the early 80s, very early 80s. Then you've got to see this book. You've got to read this book. So that's it from me for the second part of some books that you can read in boxing. And until we see each other again, be safe, wash those hands, use detergent and all that, and remember to keep those gloves up.